The Flask changes that are coming in 3.15 promise to change things up dramatically, but honestly, I'm a bit scared in the way that GGG is approaching this. However, we don't have the update in our hands yet, so today we're just going to talk about what we do know about the Flask update. Welcome, it's your friendly neighborhood Badger here, and I'm back with another 3.15 update video. Now, I hope you've been enjoying the content thus far. I really aim to be able to give my honest opinion on everything that is coming out of this without really trying to assume too much of what is happening. So hopefully it's come across that way. If it hasn't, please let me know in the comments down below. And remember to hit that sub button if you are enjoying these update videos. But today, we're talking about the Flask system rework that GGG has promised in the 3.15 update. Now, with everything that is coming, with all of the new gems, with the Flask system, with the difficulty increase, this is feeling more like your actual Atlas expansion that happens once every year, but we're getting it kind of in the middle of the year, which is kind of nice. There's a lot of really cool things coming here. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But the thing I'm the most apprehensive about is this Flask update. I'm just going to quickly read what GGG has put here on their website. So they say they've substantially reworked Path of Exile's Flask system with the goal of reducing the level of permanent player power that Flasks grant and promoting considered Flask choices that incentivize interactive gameplay. The new Instilling Orb, which is this one right here, it allows you to modify your utility Flask so that they trigger on certain conditions. So some of these conditions have been said to be like, trigger on freeze or trigger, like a bunch of stuff like that. Trigger when ignited, all of that sort of thing. These kind of conditional triggering. Now, the Enkindling Orb, it provides a boost to your utility Flask in exchange for preventing charge gain while they're active. So they've also reworked many Flasks and introduced new Gold and Corundum Flasks, which we'll talk about in a moment right here. So when they say that they've reworked many Flasks, that's a classic way that GGG goes about saying they've nerfed things. Because in most cases, Flasks have been nerfed, and we're talking about utility Flasks here. Normal Flasks like your life and mana Flasks, they're staying relatively the same as far as we know so far, and you're not going to be able to use these Instilling Orbs on these Flasks, meaning, any of these orbs on your life or mana Flasks, meaning they're primarily used for your utility Flask. So rule out things like trigger when on low life for your life Flasks or trigger when on low mana for your mana Flasks. Stuff like that's not actually going to happen, potentially just yet, right? So what does this actually mean? So this, on one hand, can be seen as an addition to the game in response to all of the uproar of people talking about, I guess, health conditions in Path of Exile and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Flask meta of constantly just spamming your Flasks, always spamming them when they're up, when they're ready to be used, or even overriding the passives that are already going from your Flasks by just consistently using them while you're mapping because you get way too many charges. They address this saying that, when Flasks were first implemented, when Path of Exile, first came to the limelight, monster density and speed of the game was drastically lower. So the Flask charges made sense back then. Over time, pack sizes have gone up, we've been clearing a lot faster, which just basically means there is literally no choice or decision making in what Flasks you're using while mapping. Now, there still is a little bit of that during bossing, trying to reserve your Flasks or anything like that, making sure they're up when you need to do damage, or, reactively using granite Flasks when you need to take a big hit, something like that, right? But in general mapping, this is a way GGG kind of wants to present to us, hey, we kind of want to slow you down a bit more, right? It is kind of nerfing our speed, nerfing our survivability, but giving us more agency in where we choose to use certain things. So we'll just quickly have a little look here as well. Things like the Basalt Flask of Iron Skin, 20% more armor has been nerfed from, I think, 100% increased armor. And then there's something like the Stibnite as well, 20% more evasion instead of 100% increased evasion. I think that's correct. And then you've got things like your Topaz, things like your Aquamarine. Now, and your Curse Immune mod on Flask as well is changed. Very similar to how these Flasks have been changed. It says removes all burning when used, or grants immunity to shock for 1 second if used while shocked. But it doesn't grant immunity to ailments while the flask is active. So you can get reignited when, it says grants immunity to ignite for 1 second if used while ignited. So you do get a little bit of immunity. But say, for example, you can't use this aquamarine flask to remove subsequent ignite. So you can't proactively use it to stop an ignite happening. Say, for example, if you feel like you're going to be hit by an Atziri's Flame Blast, you can't use the aquamarine flask beforehand and then take the blast and then you won't get ignited. No, you have to use it after you've been ignited for the effect to actually work right there, which is really interesting. And the 40% reduced effective freeze on you is another really interesting change. It's not immune to freezing right here. It's reduced effective freeze. Now, this has been stated that reduced effective freeze means that you're not going to be frozen in place and you can't use anything. You're going to be basically 60% slowed. You'll have a freeze on you of 60% effectiveness. Kind of like when you get frozen as a Juggernaut, but you can still move at the same speed because you've got the Juggernaut's node, you know? There's a lot of changes coming out here, and it's really easy to look at all of these changes and say they're all just nerfs to how we're going to play the game. And honestly, you know, in the TLDR, it's kind of nerfs. What we're getting here is nerfs. But we are getting a response to those nerfs in ways of being able to craft our flasks so they trigger automatically under certain circumstances. Now, what do I think about this? On one hand, it's a pretty cool idea. I really like it. It is a response to, you know, solving the problem of too many buttons to press and flasks just being a bit of a problem. But in the other regard, it is a little bit strange to gate this behind crafting and behind dropping your instilling or enkindling orbs. Let's just take, say, you know, a random case. Well, it's not really a case study. A random example. You know, someone who may have stopped playing PoE or isn't playing PoE as much because, honestly, the flask system is really hurting their hands and they've got actual hand problems, RSI, things like that, right? A system like this can very much help that. You know, you're not having to press those buttons and you can choose when the game actually reacts to pressing those buttons, kind of like your against the TOS, you know, flask macro that everyone talks about, right? But gating that behind a crafting, you know, first of all, dropping your instilling orb, and then crafting the right type of craft. You're not just going to, you know, click and choose what you want. It is a type of RNG craft, right? Gating that behind two forms of RNG before you can even get that is still not really solving the problem. You know, you might be playing SSF and you might have to grind for 50 hours before you can even get that flask. And in that time, it's gonna hurt you, right? Now, personally, myself, fortunately, I don't suffer from any problems with RSI or anything like that, but I'm very conscious of this. I'm fairly young, but this is going to affect, it still affects a lot of people, you know, to this day. So we'll have to wait and see. If you do have problems, let me know in the comments down below what you do think about this. On the other hand, hey, it is a step in the right direction. We're getting something, you know, something is changing. And hopefully we're going to be able to train our brains to not just spam our flasks all the time. If we constantly are still spamming our flasks, you know, we're going to notice that we're dying a lot more because we're not having flask charges up or anything like that. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Now, lastly, we'll talk about the gold and Corundum flasks right here. So first of all, the Corundum flask, which is a stun threshold flask, and you can't be stunned if you've been stunned during flask effect. So it's a reactive stun flask, which is really interesting. And then we've got the gold flask, which is increased rarity of items found. Now, this, honestly, to me, is a bit of a meme flask. You know, could be used, but this just screams RNT bot flask to me. Honestly, this is just another flask for the arsenal of RMT bots, and yeah, that's basically it. It'll be really interesting to see if there's any other new modifiers to roll on flasks that we can then automate with your instilling orbs as well. You know, more crafting mats in the game. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Hopefully there'll be a slot in the currency tab for these ones there as well. That's pretty much all I really do have to say. But the last thing that I will talk about is Something that's in conjunction that we don't know full effects of yet, but we have heard from Chris that it is happening. There are going to be nerfs across the board to how ailment immunity works. So we can probably safely assume that permanent ailment immunity from ascendancies, say for example your Raider, or maybe even conditional ailment immunities across the board, say for example your Inquisitor on consecrated ground, you could probably assume that those things are going to be nerfed. It has been stated that it is too easy to achieve ailment immunity in the game, and they want, once again, to give the agency back to players in choosing how they go about that. I would assume that things like the Occultist, immunity to freeze could still stay because that's a specific type of thing. But across the board, ailment immunity is something that, is too widely used and come by. Path of Exile basically wants to say to you, hey, we want you to get ignited, but then we want you to be able to use flasks to remove that, or, that sort of stuff as well. And curse immunity as well doesn't work on curse maps anymore. It removes a curse if it is on you, but it doesn't give you the immunity for the duration of the flask, which is really, really interesting. So we'll have to wait and see how that all pans out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about these changes. Whether you think it's a good thing, whether you think it's a bad thing. And remember, if you do enjoy that content, honestly, hit that sub button. It means the most to me. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for watching. And until next time, Badger is out.